observing, and today we're gonna talk about the Cold War. First, we're gonna start with the most important dates that we have. So first, we're gonna state with some important dates, the most highlighted and the most interesting that I personally like. Well, the first one will be the Berlin blockade. That will be the first one in the war, okay? So this was one of the first major internationalist crises of the Cold War during the multinational occupation of post-World War II Germany. The Soviet Union blocked the Western Allies' railway, road, and canal access to the sectors of Berlin under the Western control. Another date that I like is in October 16 of 1962. I guess that I'll know this date because they're the Cuban missiles. The Cuban missiles is also the October crisis. It was a 13-day confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union, initiated by Soviet ballistic missiles deployed in Cuba. So obviously, what we need to know first is what does the term Cold War refers to. It's defined like a state of political hostility and military tension between two countries or power blocs, involving propaganda, subversion, threats, economic sanctions, and other measures sought often forward. So I bet now you're wondering, who's this Adam Smith you're talking about? So Adam Smith is the father of modern capitalism. But I bet you're still wondering, what's capitalism? Well, capitalism is an economic and political system in which a country, trade, and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than the state. So, now that we know what is capitalism and who proposed capitalism, what we need to know is how does it work. So, the production of goods and service is based on supply and demand in the general market, known as a market economy, rather than through central planning known as planned economy or command economy. So now we're changing the subject, we're changing from capitalism to socialism. Now, who is this man right here? Who is this? Well, his name is Karl Marx. He is best known as a philosopher, but as a revolutionary whose works inspired the foundation of many communism regimens in the 28th century. It is hard to think of many who have had as much influence in this creation of the modern world. Now we need to know what socialism is. It's similar to communism, advocates that means of production be owned by the people, either directly or through the government agencies. Socialism also believes that wealth and income should be shared more equally among the people. So now we need to know how socialism works, how the socialism economy system works. Well, it's a system of production where goods and services are produced directly for use, in contrast for capitalism economic system, where goods and services are produced to generate profit and therefore indirectly for use. Production under socialism will be directly and solely for use. What countries were the world leaders during this period?
There were two of them, the USSR and the United States.
Why did countries who were allies during the wars become enemies afterwards?
They did not trust each other, so they were actually after the wars they actually were in a race to develop arms, technologies in which they were able to outrun each other's technologies. So it was actually very difficult to trust each other. So I would think that probably the reason was that they didn't trust each other.
Where did the Cold War take place?
It took place all over the world, but especially in places in which in countries in which the two superpowers were trying to influence their respective points of view according to their democracy or communism. So in a place like Latin America, the United States was a very powerful ally for all the countries. So they were very influenced by the United States. But in places like Vietnam, in which the United States lost the war, it was because internal turmoil, and also because it couldn't actually push its own point of view about democracy in that specific country. So it took place, the Cold War took place all over the world, but you could only see it in places like Vietnam, the Koreas, in which they were actually taking part in a conflict or taking sides in a conflict.
What opinion did the general public have of the Cold War?
It depends on who you ask. It depends on the person and the person's education. Most of the people who are educated would probably be willing to support the United States democracy. While those people who were a little more radical, they would probably support socialism. But again, it all depends on who you ask. For example, if you ask what is the policy that the Mexican United States follows, it's actually for the Mexican United States, there is no Cold War. For us, there is no Cold War. In an official document, we never refer to these specific events as part of a war, since we can only have an actual war or not. So we are very respectful in this kind of we usually follow political correctness, and that is the reason why we do not believe there is a Cold War, as the Mexican government says. But in some other countries, they actually are open to this kind of comments, to this kind of policy. But I would probably say then, and that it all depends on who you ask.
What type of weapons did the two world powers have at their disposal?
At the beginning, or if I put it this way, after the war, the ending of the Second World War, there were many technologies that the two countries managed to develop, but their specific objective was centered around A-bombs, atomic bombs, and later on became nuclear armaments, and even thermonuclear warheads, which are actually a very powerful arms. Not only that, but actually submarines. What else? There's many things that each specific country developed as part of this race in armaments.
So personally, I think that to understand that World War II presented an opportunity for the the Soviet Union and the US to become major players in the world stage. And I think that after World War II, the Soviet Union and the US emerged or raised more strong and how can I say influential countries in the world. Both became very important in the world. The US had an age with the atomic bomb, but the other country that followed soon after, with Eastern Europe under Soviet control, the USSR wasted no time in creating satellite Soviet states to keep up Western influence. The USSR cut off ties with Western Europe and the US, which had offered to help rebuild those countries with Marshall Plan. The end result was the Cold War. What I think about capitalism is that people who work hard are rewarded, right? Opportunities for all, the sky is the limit. Probably the one modern economic system that is useful. It provides competition, which leads to bigger and better products. And we can't forget about technologies that make the life so much easier and more, happy. And the market is decided by the customer. The government doesn't control it. It's pretty free. And what I think about socialism is that in socialistic society, the government pretty, totally determines who produces, who doesn't, what, and how much. I think this isn't fair. This doesn't work in a socialistic society. There is no incentive to work or produce. You're just doing because you have to, not because you want to. Unlimitedly, all socialistic systems have failed. There are a few in Europe that are still struggling, but their economies are falling apart. Eventually, because of the failing businesses, all of the government benefits the government benefits will not have the quality